Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to Drak Reviews, where we take on a game that has been anticipated for a good few years now, as we dive into a review for Cuphead, Don't Deal with the Devil, by Studio MDHR, and also developer Jared Moldenauer. Let's go ahead and start things off with the story. Like I said, this game has been anticipated for a couple of years, but on to the story. The story the plot is actually really simple, as you play Cuphead and his buddy Mugman, because this can be co-op, and they go off to a casino and get in some trouble with the devil, where they accidentally sell their souls, and the only way to make it right is that they have to pay the debts of others. And by that, I mean you have to go collect some of the debts that some other bosses in the game have to the devil. So based on plot, you guys can already tell this is so cute and so silly. I didn't take too many points off of this one. I especially loved a lot of the aesthetics there of like, oh no, you guys have ended yourself in a pretty pickle. Yeah, I thought it was overall very, very fun, and the story was lighthearted like it would be in an old school cartoon. So I was just amazed that we got such a simplistic story but such deep gameplay out of it. But yes, not really too many points taken off the story. Moving on into visuals. So in case you guys can't tell from the footage I'm putting up, this is an indie game that was made to look like an old school 1920s, 1930s cartoon, and it is pulled off splendidly. This game is gorgeous when you get into all of the various levels and boss fights. It has a lot of really great visuals, not only game elements, but backgrounds. The bosses themselves are really great, hand-drawn, and in some cases, kind of twisted. The way that I mean is like a couple of boss fights in this game tend to have like this final boss mode where they go even more warped than they were before. And some of that stuff is downright creepy. And so I'll give some props to the animators and to the people who brought that stuff to life, because holy crap, man. Some of it is just gorgeous, and some of it is absolute nightmare fuel. So yeah, didn't really take any points off the visuals on this one. Moving on into gameplay. So Cuphead is a shoot 'em up, and if you haven't played a shoot 'em up before, you've never played Contra. That's the best way I know how to describe this. If you played like a plain shoot 'em up, then you have the basic gist of this. Like if you played Gradius or R-Type, stuff like that, you know how this game goes, but it's more akin to Contra. But it has some interesting ideas added to it. In the fact of when you play a Contra level, you have the level itself that you have to go through, and then you have the boss fight itself, or all together. And so in some cases, like you may end up halfway through the level, get killed by the boss, and then you have to make your way through that half of the level again. The interesting idea the Studio MDHR implements with Cuphead is to take the level segment and the boss segment and to make them their own separate levels. What I mean is that you are going to get a level segment that is run and gun, maybe has mini bosses here and there, but it's solely to be a run and gun. So you can focus solely on that. Whereas they took the bosses and added, and because of the fact that you're already at the boss, they added a lot more complexity to the encounters that, say, Konami or Capcom couldn't do back in the day, because you had to have a level attached to it. So I actually will compliment them for being able to do this, because it allows for the boss fights to be awesome, even though, as you guys will see in my game footage, you'll die a lot. And on top of that, the boss fights don't really ever get boring mechanic-wise. I mean, granted, you'll tunnel vision it because you know what's going to come next, but when you come across that new boss, they're going to have something new that is going to shock you just as much as the previous boss did when you were learning his mechanics. The run and guns are roughly the same way. I will admit, though, I did take some points off, and the reason I did take some points off is, A, load times are an SOB, at least in my interpretation of it, and I'm running off of an Xbox One Elite console when I was playing this game, which is supposed to reduce load times and supposed to reduce a lot of the wait time that you have in between all of this stuff. And if I'm getting loading screens that are pretty long, and yes, they were pretty long, then I can only imagine that consoles past the Elite are probably also getting these, and consoles before the Elite are getting worse load times on that matter. So I did find that to be a little bit of a problem. The other thing too that I have noticed is if there's enough elements on the screen, I kind of feel like the developer used this to his advantage, but I'm not sure on it. If there's enough elements on the screen, it does create slowdown, and you do drop some frames, and that can ultimately kill you. I've had that happen very few times, but it is at least enough times to acknowledge it. And so I will admit I took off a little bit of points when it came to gameplay, but overall the gameplay is very spot on. And just in case you didn't get what I was saying before, in Cuphead, you will die a lot. But that's okay, because it's a learning process of any game. Moving on into the audio. Audio is, again, very gorgeous in this one. It's made to sound like a 1920s, 1930s cartoon. I also like the fact that they garbled up and graveled up a lot of the voices, although rare, that you do hear. In particular, like the shopkeeper pork rind, when you hear the welcome, it sounds very graveled, very old, so that you can get that kind of aesthetic with it. The music also is very upbeat and very immersive. It actually can get you into the fight, so much so that it can be, in some cases, distracting. Probably, again, a really great plan by Studio MDHR to kind of throw you off your feet. It's one of those games where I thankfully have the soundtrack for. I don't have to ask you guys to help me find it. I know where to find the soundtrack, and it's great. So yeah, no points taken off for audio. It was really well done. Moving on into replayability and presentation. So the replay value here is kind of 50-50. If you're a shoot 'em up fan, you love Contra games, you love the classic shoot 'em ups, and you're willing to you're willing to acknowledge that these games do take a certain degree of patience, this isn't going to be a problem for you. Newcomers, I honestly think, will have issues, and it's just because the death toll is going to get pretty high in the end, and that can be discouraging for a new player, especially a player who's never done a shoot 'em up before and doesn't really understand how they work. So at that point, I'm not saying that it's a big problem, but it is a problem that I have to acknowledge, and every game is trying to bring in new audiences, and a high death count I don't see as bringing in too many, an increased viewership for it, or at least an increased playership, increase of players. Moving on into presentation, does it all come together? Oh yes, in such a magnificent way. I cannot pour enough compliments onto Studio MDHR. You guys did an amazing job with the product with the final product that is in our hands, and we are able to play to our heart's content, which is why I have no problem giving Cuphead Don't Deal with the Devil an 8.5 out of 10. It is a solid B+ effort. Like I said, the high death count is going to have an issue with newcomers, and on top of that, the load times need to be fixed. Something needs to happen where they're patched. But aside from that, this is an enjoyable experience for anybody to be able to pick up and play, even if it's just that you play the first level, you get frustrated, and you die, and you rage quit. I think you'll at least get some level of enjoyment before you rage quit out of the game. But is it worth it? Now, currently, Cuphead Don't Deal with the Devil, I know that it's not necessarily a subtitle, but I do like it. Cuphead Don't Deal with the Devil. You could currently get it on Xbox One as well as Windows, and it is also available for Steam. And it is available at the price of $19.99. Is it worth it at that price? Abso-freaking-lutely. Even for a newcomer, that's not necessarily too much money to spend to at least experiment with this game and then decide that you don't want to you don't want to press further with it. $20 is kind of an easy enough budget title for people to be able to pick up and not necessarily regret their purchase. So I think it was a really great idea by Studio MDHR to make it as cheap as it is. And yes, it is absolutely worth every single penny. And in fact, if you don't have this game either on Steam or on Xbox, get it. You will enjoy the ever-loving crap out of it just as much as I have. And that's going to go ahead and do it for this review of Cuphead. And of course, I will thank you guys so much for all your time, love, and patience. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back in time for the next review.